Thank you. Hello everyone, my name is Simona di Nepi. I'm Charles and Lynn Schusterman Curator of Judaica here at the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston, and it's a great pleasure for me to be here with the director, Elan Golod, and Melanie Levy, the co-producer of the film, to start a conversation about this very powerful documentary film. So I'll be asking some questions, and then I leave the floor to you to ask your own questions. And even though I watched the film this week to think of what questions I wanted to ask, so this is the second time I watched it, I found myself again towards the end of the film getting very, very emotional. I'm sure many of you feel the same. It is a moving, powerful, at points heartbreaking, and very thought-provoking film. So, very, very compelling film. And I think that before I ask you some questions, I wanted to say what I find particularly strong in the movie is the exploration of such an enormously important historic event, the trial of the century, through the lenses, the thick lenses of this one fascinating man. And there is this alternation and dance between the collective dimension, the historic dimension, and the personal story of the man. And as the film becomes more about him and his strongly felt experience of those events, we're more and more gripped. That's how I felt. So we hear from Laura Kruger, the curator at the Hebrew Union College in New York, how she stumbled into Nathan and his work at a senior citizen show. So I wanted to ask how you two, either or both of you, first come across him, his story, his work. What were your first impressions, and what made you decide to do this project?
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you all for being here. This has been a long journey. I've been working on this film for about 8 or 9 years. Around 2014, 2015, I was looking for subject matter for a documentary, and I happened to come across an article about the exhibition that Laura Kruger eventually did for Nathan at Hebrew Union College Museum. And as soon as I read this article, I was captivated by the circumstances of his story. This 18-year-old Jewish kid confronted with the top Nazis and learning about the Holocaust in real time as the rest of the world was learning about it. And I was also drawn to his artwork, and it felt like a fresh way of tackling this subject matter that, his work is so colorful and bright, which is not what you usually expect to see from Holocaust-related artworks. So I thought, it was important to me. I didn't want to make a very typical Holocaust film, but Nathan, with his unique storytelling, felt like an interesting opportunity. So I got his information from Laura. I cold called him. At first, he was a little paranoid, didn't quite understand what I wanted from him, but we were able to strike up a conversation and eventually build this friendship for maybe a few months. I would just visit him once a week and bring him coffee and a piece of cake from the local diner and just listen to his stories. And eventually he was comfortable enough for me to bring a camera and start filming him, and I ended up filming him for the last 4 years of his life. And Melanie, who we've collaborated on other things in the past, she was one of the first people I went to when I read the article about Nathan, and has helped me shepherd this project throughout this process. And do you want to add anything?
I think you did a really good job. I do remember the first meeting like 10 years ago now at the Brooklyn Museum when we were just going over different possibilities for film because we had enjoyed collaborating earlier in other projects, as Elan mentioned. And I think the potential power of Nathan's story to bring the Nuremberg trials to life in a new way for audiences today felt always really, really powerful as well.
So you've actually already covered, so I'm going to open to remember my question. You've already covered the second question, which was about the duration.
I like to be efficient.
Thank you. The duration, because as I was writing down the questions the other night when I watched the film, I think halfway through the film, I wrote, how is Nathan now? And of course the answer came towards the end of the film, and also when you show in those final sequences the successive birthday candles that he blows, we realize that how long this journey continued. So you said that was the question, how long and how your relationship evolved. 4 years from the first time that you spoke to him to...
Pretty much, he was 89 when I first met him, and he passed away just before his 94th birthday. He was 93 when he passed.
So it became a friendship, I would imagine.
Absolutely. I mean, he unfortunately never married or had children, but he had a few friends, but I sort of became like a surrogate grandson to him.
And Melanie, you would go sometimes from time to time?
I mean, this is really a testament to Elan and their personal relationship. I think my role in the process was always sort of looking at the story and advising on where the potential, where it could go. But
helping to shape the story. Yeah.
Total testament. For example, we spoke in depth about how to include Elan's presence in the story. Perhaps, for example, the voicemails and the conversations that were left. These sorts of things were always a part of it. But it is a testament to Elan's commitment and interest in this film, and it's almost like a separate sort of a film that requires the time for it to generate, even to find what it is, what the story is. It was just this commitment to hearing the story of this elder gentleman whose voice might disappear that I fully give Elan the credit for pursuing.
And letting, like you said, letting the story not only of what was, but the actual story of your relationship and the project unfold for enough time to become even more powerful.
Yeah, I mean, just to add, I definitely at first was resistant to including myself in the film, but Nathan kind of forces your hand and insisted that I kind of become part of the story. So it was hard to avoid.
Because he speaks directly to you, and
yeah.
We as viewers see that he says, do this and do that, and Elan, come here and make sure to introduce. So that's actually related to my next question. A very interesting moment when he's interviewed the first time in 2003 for that project that didn't happen of a possible publication. He shuts up the interviewer by saying repeatedly, your questions are messing me up, just leave me alone. I had to wonder if he also did that to you, and if that meant that what we see was mainly him, just you letting him roll and say his story, or you were actually able to ask questions?
Here and there I was able to direct the conversation a little bit. I found, for me, the most effective strategy would be to pick and choose which drawings I wanted him to talk about. But he would tell the story the way he wanted to tell it, and it was just me sitting there listening and absorbing, and then we had 300 plus hours of footage from which we crafted this film, yeah.
Well, actually, I'm going to jump to another question, not the next one, because of what you just said, when you had 300 hours of footage. Was there anything in the initial footage that you had to leave out, maybe because of consideration of duration or anything like that? Something maybe about Nathan, that it didn't make the cut in the end, but you would love us to know?
I mean, Nathan had, definitely an interesting life outside of his Nuremberg experiences. I mean, he did stay in the army for about 12 years. He served in Japan during the Korean War, and he was full of interesting stories which, are fascinating, but it didn't quite serve the story that we ended up deciding to tell. Could have been a mini-series or something like that, but...
I would have watched it.
Yeah.
Melanie, can you tell me about your role as a producer, co-producer here, how it is different from other projects that you've done, that you've worked on, what you will remember about this?
That's a great question, thank you so much. I think, Elan is an editor for years and years. That was his primary role in filmmaking, and mine is too. So I think I really valued and relished that we were both coming at it from the perspective of having poured over hundreds of hours of material from other documentary films and kind of figuring out, well, what is the story? What are these larger themes that we're trying to say? So it was very joyful for us, to sit late into the night with the cut as it was evolving and kind of hone in and cut down until we came to this question of memory and history and the wrestling with truth here for Nathan, how to bear witness to that when there's complexity, and how to also honor complicated histories as well. Anyway, so I think that's what we sort of zoned in on. And I don't know if I'll have the pleasure of working with another editor as a co-producer again. I mean, it's a really great, it's a great collaboration.
I mean, we'll continue working together.
Thanks.
And you mentioned here the truth, the element of truth, right? So one of the key moments, also one of the most powerful, even painful moments, is, especially for you, I'm sure, the moment that you confront Nathan about that episode and possible discrepancy between the time of the date of death of Goering and whether Nathan was still there. So he's visibly hurt and becomes really into a panic, a sheer panic. It must have been very difficult for you. How did you manage to settle that down, and how, if that changed anything between you two?
I mean, it was definitely the most difficult day of filming. I mean, how I dealt with it personally was therapy. Thankfully, it didn't fracture the relationship with Nathan, and I visited him the next week, and we were able to move on from that tense day. I think Melanie and I had lots of conversations leading up to that day of filming. How do we handle this? How do we, as documentarians, how do we follow the truth while not putting his memory on trial? How do I balance my being Nathan's friend while also trying to tell his story in a complete way? It's complex. Do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I mean, I think it took a lot of courage to do. In some ways, going into that conversation, you kind of know where it's going to end on some level. You have a feeling it's going to end like that. But I think you really had a strong feeling, and I understood this as well. You needed to see him go there in the film in order to kind of feel the whole story. I also just wanted to add in terms of animation, because animation also played a role in that moment. And one of the unique things about working on this film with you too was this, how naturally the animation fell into place. It was like always a part of the vision for the film, the potential to bring these drawings to life, and it was like this really simple sort of, didn't it feel like this?
I mean, as soon as I saw Nathan's artwork, I felt we needed animation to bring it to life. It did take us a while to find the right animator who could do justice to his work.
Oh, so that's interesting, because I was wondering, maybe some people here, so the animation we see, is it based on some of his drawings but then done by someone else? Or?
Yeah, so we found an animator based in Paris. Other than the animation of like our conversation at the end, all of the other animations are based on specific drawings. I gave this animator Heloise in Paris a bunch of his artwork as references, and she brought it to life.
It blends beautifully and it feels like it's his work. So that's so you've mentioned, which was fascinating, that you recently had a screening in a Nuremberg courtroom where the trial took place. Tell us about that. Were you both there? And
Melanie unfortunately wasn't able to join me, but I was there. Our composer, who was based in Amsterdam, was there. It was definitely an incredible experience to bring Nathan's story full circle, so to speak. We had a full house in the courtroom, all German audience, and it was very interesting just to see how well they responded to Nathan's story. I don't think they caught on to as much of the Jewish humor, but they really connected with Nathan as an individual, and were very interested in his story. So yeah, it was quite the experience.
Just to think of what Nathan, I would assume that happened after Nathan passed, what Nathan would have felt like.
He would have been thrilled.
So proud,
yeah.
Right?
And he would be thrilled to have a screening here at this beautiful, beautiful museum.
Yeah,
It's very
to know that his story is in a museum would be amazing to him. And thanks to the success of the film, we have gotten inquiries from several museums who want to include his work in their collections. So we're slowly preserving his artistic legacy.
I'm nice. So how are we with time? Where is my? Yes, let's open to questions from you, from the audience. So am I going to bring the mic myself?
Yeah, just repeat the question back.
Okay, yeah. Please go ahead, yeah.
Thank you so much for making it. It was really beautiful. And I came to love Nathan. I was actually planning to try to go to New York and meet him until I saw the ending of it. I was going to ask you, this is obviously a really incredible untold story, and that's something that I searched for a lot, and so I love hearing how you found the untold story. I was going to ask you, what made it worth a film was his drawings, obviously. That's what made him extraordinary with his own experiences. It struck me during the film that he was an ordinary person, like rank-and-file soldier, just like my grandpa was fighting the Nazis. He was an ordinary soldier guarding extraordinary men. I mean, they're extraordinary in the most terrible way possible, but they were the leaders. They weren't the rank-and-file. Those people didn't get on trial and executed, for the most part. So my question for you is, when you were interacting with him on a daily level, what made you sense that he was a totally ordinary, older GI, Asian gentleman, and what made him completely extraordinary to you?
Did everyone hear? Do you want to?
I can summarize. So this one, thank you so much for that question. It's really fascinating to watch this film in this moment. Every time I've seen the film over the last several years, it's been touring the world. It means something totally different to me, depending on the moment in history. And I always think to myself, God, everyone brings their own histories, their own understanding of this history, and their experiences depending on the generation. So the person in the audience, this lovely person, says their father was a veteran.
My grandpa captured German POWs.
I'm sorry, your grandfather, of course. Okay, captured German POWs. And you related to Nathan's story through that lens of an ordinary soldier. Here's an ordinary soldier dealing with extraordinary criminals. These were not just any people involved in this atrocity. This was the top architects, the architects of it. So the question is, how do you handle Nathan's ordinariness?
Right. No, the question was really, what did you see in him that was totally ordinary, and what did you see in him that was completely extraordinary that struck you?
What did you see that was ordinary versus extraordinary that struck you?
Thank you.
I mean, I was obviously immediately drawn to his artwork, but once I met Nathan in person, you're immediately struck by what an incredible storyteller he is. And, you know, just the way he frames his story is incredible. But yeah, at Nuremberg, he didn't have a voice in the proceedings, so he was just there. I mean, technically speaking, the guards were not supposed to speak with their defendants, but many of them, including Nathan, did. Yeah, I mean, I also love how he took whatever opportunity he had to tell off these leaders, and I mean, he could have been silent and not let them know that he was Jewish, for fear of their reaction. But no, he insisted. He was like, "I'm in charge now." So just that viewpoint was extraordinary to me. Do you want to?
Oh no, that was.
I'd like to ask, first of all, thank you so much for the film and the detail. I especially love how you captured so many different, like even just preserving those voicemails and things added so much to the record. But I want to ask, just like in your journey of making the film, clearly an important moment in the film is the Goering, whether it was there or not. At what point during your process did you discover that or start questioning? Was it at the beginning? Is that always part of the story, or did that happen during the whole 8 years process of this film?
When I first met Nathan, some of his stories are indeed somewhat fantastical, and you don't know quite what to believe. So early on in the process, I started looking into what records would we be able to track down. It wasn't a fast process, so I think it was about 2 years into filming that we were able to find those records, and I wanted to wait until I was sure that we had all the material we needed before confronting Nathan, just in case that was the end of the film. But I hope that answered the question.
Yes, further back. Yeah.
I was just wondering, as a follow-up, did you also check on his personal history? He said his grandfather was the chief rabbi of Damascus.
I think that was probably one of the darlings of the film that we loved very much, but we decided in the end to leave out, just because we had this section that was talking about his father in a little more depth and the relationship and the extended family, kind of what that was like. But in the end, he didn't have a present day relationship with his family, so it felt like if we went there, it would just bring up even more questions that were unanswerable in a way, or that he wouldn't, does that do a good job of saying?
Yeah, I mean, from the digging that I was able to do, I mean, the person that, he says it was his grandfather was in fact the chief rabbi of Damascus. He was still in Damascus, so he didn't have a personal relationship with him, but he did come from that lineage.
Yes, please.
I have to say, following along in the film, I was very disappointed when the military archivist discovered that he was there in the beginning, not all the time. But my question is, does that matter? Because he was an artist telling a story through his art. So whether he was there or not, did it matter to you?
I mean, I think we share the same feeling. I don't think that it matters for appreciating him as an artist, as a storyteller. I think had I not gone down that rabbit hole, there would be people asking questions. So as a documentarian, I felt we needed to explore that. But to me personally, it didn't affect my friendship with him or, memory is a tricky thing.
Another 2 questions, okay? One?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, please.
Well, I found it fascinating on his point that the idea of that you create memories, you repeat stories over, the whole thing that you can form a memory that isn't perfect. I like that you kept it truthful. Question. What did he do after he left the army? I mean, I was thinking maybe he's a little autistic. Was he able to make a living? Very high functioning, but that focus, and a hyper focus, and he kind of talked more at people than with people. So any thoughts?
He was never formally diagnosed, but very possibly on the spectrum. For about 15 or 20 years, he worked at this bookstore in Manhattan, and he scraped by, was able to make a living, but for the last 30 years of his life, he lived in this semi-subsidized housing on the Lower East Side.
And I think, you've said in the past, and I know the question is, we have a problem in this country about the elderly among us and loneliness, especially in the veteran community. And so at this stage of his life where you entered his life as well, the question of bearing witness, I think, was an important question for us. And so I feel like that sort of relates in terms of, at that stage where you might be a little bit softer in your memory. I did want to just mention for this one audience that this today happens to be the cusp of a theatrical screening for the film. The film will be opening this coming weekend at the Quad Theater in New York City, which is...
If any of you have friends or family in New York, please send them next weekend to see the film. The better turnout we get, the likelier that the film will come back to Boston and to other cities. So,
What link can we send them to the film to see it in New York?
It's on the theater's called the Quad Cinema in Manhattan. It's on their website.
And it should also be posted on our website,
Yes.
Nathan-Ism.com,
Yeah.
which is easy enough to remember.
Correct. Yeah.
Well, join me to thank Elan and Melanie for this very special artwork.